Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me. And we're starting. They say that somewhere between love and hate, there is a fine line. I once read an online post that said that human emotions can easily move from one extreme to the other. Maybe it's true. I used to love my wife very much and would have taken a bullet for her. Now it took everything I had to keep from putting a bullet between her treacherous eyes. My name is Abraham Ryan. Abe to my friends. I was an average student in high school. I did a little sports and graduated in 2001 somewhere in the middle of my class performance. I wasn't sure what I was going to do at that moment, but my decision was made one fateful morning in September 2001 when terrorists attacked and destroyed the World Trade Center. The next day I enlisted in the Army. I spent 4 years as an artilleryman and completed a tour of duty in Afghanistan before I received an honorable discharge. During my service, I took several college courses, but took advantage of my benefits to graduate in computer and electronics. That's where I met Kirsten. We dated for a few months and fell in love with each other. I was the happiest person in the world when she accepted my marriage proposal. However, there was only one catch. Kirsten's father, Bart Robertson, was a fairly wealthy man, being the CEO of a large accounting firm in our region. He didn't seem particularly impressed with me, and he was concerned that I might qualify for Kirsten's trust fund, so he insisted that I sign a prenuptial agreement to protect her assets. I didn't even know she had money, and I certainly didn't know anything about her family's wealth, so I agreed after everything was checked by a lawyer who turned out to be a good friend of my father. The agreement was fairly standard, but included a clause regarding adultery. According to the agreement, if we divorce on the basis of adultery, the cheating party will receive absolutely no support from the other, and will leave the marriage only with what he or she has contributed to it. I wasn't worried because I loved Kirsten, and I wasn't going to cheat on her ever. However, I realized that her father was worried that I might cheat his daughter and try to somehow take over her trust fund, which, as I later learned, was quite significant. After college, Kirsten went to work for her father's company, starting on the ground floor like any other business school graduate who had just graduated from college. Obviously, there are no special privileges for a little daddy's daughter. I worked full-time for a service company that hired me part-time during the last 2 years of college and worked as a field service representative repairing computers, servers, and networks. It was a good job that paid well and provided great benefits. Between you and me, we did pretty well. Even better, I didn't have to leave the area often, maybe once every few months for a training seminar on the latest technologies. Kirsten spent several nights at her parents' house, ostensibly to work on a project for her father. At first, our marriage was wonderful. Not only did we both have good jobs that we enjoyed, but we were also able to make a down payment on a nice 3-bedroom house. Bart was shocked when I declined his offer to make a down payment. "Thanks, but no thanks," I told him. "I've been saving money for this for a long time, and I think Kirsten and I need to do it on our own." Even though it was all true, I knew he hated me, and the last thing I wanted was for him to be able to hang something on our heads. Before everything went to hell, I thought we'd be partners for life. Kirsten never gave me anything to worry about, and the love was amazing. We often went out for dinner and dancing and usually ended up celebrating the night in bed. Kirsten and I also attended various corporate events hosted by her father. I always felt a little out of place at these events, but Kirsten stayed by my side to make me feel comfortable. Her father attached great importance to his daughter's work and made sure to introduce her to everyone he could. On second thought, he could have introduced me as her husband, but he never mentioned me by name. What he apparently didn't know was that the company I worked for had installed all the servers in his company and had a valid contract for various network and IT services. After working in this job for a year, I became something of an external supervisor for the contractors who worked with the technical department of his company, which meant that I stopped by from time to time just to check on how things were going. As a result, I got to know quite a few people who worked at Kirsten's company. It might come in handy later. Our first child, John, was born almost a year after our marriage. I will never forget my mother's reaction. Of course, she was happy that the baby was healthy, but I saw how her face frowned when she looked at the baby carefully. She didn't tell me anything, so I put it in the back of my mind. Our daughter Kelsey was born a little over a year later. Kirsten barely gave birth to Kelsey, and she had a tubal ligation. Of course, we discussed this in advance and agreed that we had contributed to the preservation of the human race. My mother's reaction was the same as when John was born. It was only a few months later that my mother came to me with her concerns. "Abe, I pray to God that I'm wrong, but I'm not sure if the kids are yours," she said. "What?" I asked. "Call it maternal intuition if you want, but I really think you need to get your kids tested just to make sure," she said. I trusted my mother and knew that she would never come to me with something like this without a good reason, so I decided to seriously consider her offer. Kirsten and I adapted pretty well to the lifestyle of a married couple with children, and life in the Ryan family was wonderful. "We're living the dream," we said when people asked how we were doing. For now, I've left aside my mother's concerns. Of course, Kirsten wouldn't cheat on me, right? Everything was going well until about 4 or 5 months ago. It was then that Kirsten informed me that her father had hired a manager from New York and was thinking about making her his personal assistant. According to her, this meant that if she was chosen, she would work later hours and possibly go on trips to visit clients across the country or even around the world. "How often would you have to travel?" I asked her about it one night. "I do not know. Maybe a couple of times a month," she said. "How long?" I asked. She shook her head. "I'm not sure. The last manager at this place was sometimes absent for a whole week and sometimes more." "A week?" I asked. "Or more? It's going to be very hard for the kids, not to mention us." "Don't worry," she said. "I'm just one of the 3 candidates under consideration. I doubt I'll get this job. But if I do, it will mean a huge salary increase for me, which means that we will be able to save more for retirement and for paying for children's college tuition. However, we have some time to adjust. They won't make any firm decisions for another couple of months. But I will spend more time with my father until a decision is made." I didn't like what she told me too much, and I wasn't convinced that we needed the extra money. But I knew better than to rock the boat without any additional information. The Army taught me how important it is to get reliable information about a target before opening fire, so that's exactly what I decided to do. A couple of days later, I found myself in Kirsten's company, conducting a random check of the server room. Everything seemed to be in order, so I took the opportunity to find out everything I could about this new manager. I talked to a few people in the area, did some digging myself, and found out that the new manager's name is Jake Riley. Jake had just moved to this city from New York, where he held a similar position in a fairly large Wall Street firm. This was a wake-up call for me. Why would he leave New York for the Midwest? Of course, he could earn more there than here. I also found out that he was married and had a child, but for some reason they decided to stay in New York. Another alarm signal. I made a mental note to think about seeking professional help from an investigator, and I knew just the right person. I knew him as Uncle Sam. No, not that Uncle Sam. He was actually my father's brother, and his name happened to be Samuel Ryan. "Is that what you think? Is this guy maybe trying to cuckold you with Kirsten?" he asked. "Yes. There's something about this guy that pisses me off," I said. "Presumably, he still has a wife and child in New York, and he recently resigned from a large Wall Street firm. Why would he leave his family and come here?" "Well, maybe it's nothing, but then again, who knows? I'll check it out and see what I can find, okay? And don't worry about the bill," he said. "Just help me with the expenses, okay?" "I can't do this to you, Uncle Sam," I said. He waved me away. "Forget it," he said. "You're a family, and that's much more important. Maybe I'll ask you to install a new server for me or something like that." Sam called me back about a week later. "You were right," he said. "Old Jake Riley has a pretty good reputation as a womanizer. That's why he left New York. It looks like he slept with the wrong wife and was in big trouble with his firm. They gave him a choice, either leave quietly or be fired. He is married, and he does have a child, a boy. He is not officially divorced, but his wife is going to divorce him. From what I've found out, she lives in a crappy trailer in Albany." "Something else," I said. "I did a thorough search and found out that Riley and Kirsten's fathers have quite a long history. In fact, Jake started out with old Bart Robertson and moved to New York about 3 years ago. That's when he got married." 3 years ago?" I asked. "Do you know if Jake and Kirsten knew each other back then?" "They did some work for the same company, and it was known that Jake often visited the Robertson house." It's strange, I thought. I had never seen or heard any mention of Jake before all this started. I remembered quite a few evenings when Kirsten came to her parents' house claiming to be working on a project. I remembered the times when she stayed overnight, telling me that this was a big and important project for the company. "There's something else," Sam said. "I did a full background check on this guy and got his birth certificate. Guess who is listed as his father? How should I know? I said. Bartholomew Robertson, he said. What? I asked. You mean Kirsten's father? There could have been another Bartholomew Robertson, but that's what it looks like, he said. I had a bad feeling about all this, but I didn't want Sam to know what I was thinking until I got more information. Do you want me to start a full-scale investigation? Sam asked. Yes, I said, and I'll pay you for it. I called Kirsten's mother, Mabel, and asked if I could come over. We always got along well, and I had a high opinion of her. Of course, she said. Bart is not here right now, but you can contact him at his office. I'm not interested in talking to Bart, I said. Nevertheless, I want to ask you a big favor. All right, she said. I grabbed a couple of bags, drove to their mansion, and met her at the door. What's going on, Abe? She asked. Something is wrong, I can tell. Yes, it is, I said. Tell me something, Mabel. Is Jake spending the night here? Yes, Mabel said. He's staying here until his apartment is ready. Why are you asking? I explained my concerns, and Mabel showed me the room where Jake slept. It had its own bathroom, so I looked in, and after a couple of minutes, I got what I needed, a couple of hairs with an attached follicle. I put them in one bag and marked it Jake. By the way, Mabel, I said, does Kirsten spend time here with Jake? Well, they've known each other for a while, so I guess that's how it is. So you think they're sleeping together? What is it? She asked. I do not know, but I intend to find out. And one more thing, Mabel, I said. How close are Bart and Kirsten? They've always been very close, she said. She's kind of a daddy's daughter and always has been. Why did you ask? I need to check something, I said. Can you show me where Bart takes a shower? Of course, Mabel said. We went into Bart's bathroom, and I found a couple more hairs with a follicle attached. Bingo. I packed them in a bag and wrote Bart on it. What's going on? Mabel asked. Mabel, I don't want to say anything until I have proof. I'll let you know what I find out. And please don't say anything to anyone. I won't tell you, Abe, she said. Just please be very careful. Bart can be quite vindictive. I followed my mother's advice and gave the children a DNA test. I included a sample from myself, Bart and Jake. I spent $500 and got the results 2 days later. It turned out that none of the children were mine. According to the test, Jake was John's father and Bart was Kelsey's father. The test also confirmed that Bart was Jake's father. Kirsten not only cheated on me and violated the prenuptial agreement, but also committed incest. Needless to say, I was beside myself with rage. That day I happened to be in Kirsten's company when Nancy Albertson, Bart's secretary, came up to me. Mr. Ryan, she said, Mr. Robertson would like to see you. I like to carry a digital voice recorder with me to meetings to make sure I don't miss anything. So I turned it on, put it in my pocket, and then followed her into the conference room a couple of floors above. When I entered, I was greeted by Bart, a man whom I recognized as a prominent Supreme Court justice, several executives, Jake, and someone whom I mistook for Bart's lawyer. 2 thugs from Bart's security team flanked me. Bart invited me to sit down. I noticed a glass of what looked like whiskey already standing in the place assigned to me at the table. Please, Bart said, have a drink with me, okay? I shook my head. No thanks, I said. I still have work hours, and I only drink with family and friends, and I'll stand if you don't mind. Everyone smiled at this, since no one answered Bart Robertson. His demeanor changed when he took a folded piece of paper and placed it on the table in front of me. Have it your way, Ryan, he said. Look, if there's a billing problem, you can solve it with our accounts receivable, I said. I don't do billing. It has nothing to do with billing, Bart said. All right, I said. So what is it? I want you to sign this right now, Bart said. You don't need to read this, just sign it so the judge can sign it and make it official. What is it? I asked. Call it an agreement that precedes the prenuptial agreement you signed earlier, he said. Just sign this and we'll be done. Did Kirsten sign this? I asked. Yes, it is, Bart said. It's interesting that she never discussed it with me, I said. I put the folded document in my briefcase without looking at it. She doesn't need to discuss this with you, Bart said. I'll ask my lawyer to review this, and if he agrees that it's in my best interest, I'll sign it, I said. And not before. I didn't actually have a lawyer, but Bart didn't know that. His face turned red and he jumped up from his chair. Damn it, man, he growled. You're going to sign this paper right now, damn it. Or what? I asked. Are you going to order your thugs to beat me up in front of your supervisors and a Supreme Court judge? Or maybe ask one of them to put a bullet in my forehead? You better sign this or you're in trouble, kid, he said. I looked at the judge, who seemed to have a cheerful expression on his face. Tell me, Your Honor, is it my imagination or does it sound like a threat? I asked. The judge nodded his head. I think it could definitely be considered a threat, he said. He turned to Bart. Let him consult with his lawyer, Bart. As soon as he sees that all this is legal and in his best interests, he will sign. Bart leaned back in his seat. By the way, Your Honor, I said, is incest still a felony in this state? I noticed a few nervous glances around the room and thought that Bart was about to explode. The judge straightened up before answering. Well, yes, it is, but I do not know anyone who has really been convicted of this. Why are you asking? He asked. Just asking about a friend, I said, looking at Bart. Just sign the damn papers, he said, taking a sip from his glass. I left the building, wondering what rumors were going around the city. I called Sam to get a recommendation from a good lawyer. He referred me to his friend Frederick Marsh. I called and made an appointment with him the next morning. The next morning, I outlined my case and showed him the test results. I also showed him the agreement that Bart had given me. I took the time to read it the night before and was furious. I couldn't believe Kirsten would do this to me. Fred, as he preferred to be called, read the agreement that Bart gave me. Have you looked at this? He asked me. Yes, I watched it, I said. Unless I'm going crazy, it means that I agree to be a willing cuckold and give up my rights as a husband. You're not going crazy, he said. It clearly says here that you agree to allow your wife to make extramarital love while giving up any right to end your relationship. It also requires that you provide all financial and parental support to 2 children who, as we now know, are not yours. The only thing is that you will receive a scholarship of $1,000 per month for their maintenance. Otherwise, you would have completely screwed up. It also says that you will agree to give up 80% of your salary and pension if you file for divorce, and pay her alimony and child support. In short, you would be nothing more than a permanent guardian of the children. It can't be legal, I said. It's not completely illegal, but it's certainly outrageous. I don't see any court that would support this. Besides, you have to be certified to agree to this, he said. What about their incestuous relationship? I asked. Fred confirmed to me that incest between adults in this state is a criminal offense and can be punishable by up to 25 years in prison. Although I really didn't want to raise 2 small children who weren't even mine, and certainly didn't want to pay them any alimony, I loved children and wanted them in my life. All I wanted was to end this sham marriage. Fred said he would prepare divorce papers based on adultery using a prenuptial agreement. Fred suggested that, under the circumstances, I should ask for custody. Let Kirsten fight for them if that's what she really wants. We decided to wait until we know if Kirsten got a new job or not before notifying her. Over the next few weeks, the house was a little chilly. Kirsten lost her temper when I mentioned a post-marital relationship. What the hell is this? I asked her. Do you really expect me to agree with something like that? Look, it doesn't really mean anything, she said. It's just something my dad wants you to sign. Did you read this before you signed it? I asked. Of course I did, she said. So you expect me to stay in a loveless marriage while you make love? In the meantime, do I have to take care of your children? You can't be serious, I said. I'm serious, Abe, she said. I love my job and I'm not going to quit. I really love you, and you will be taken care of. So what's it to you? Have you taken care of me? I asked. I don't want to be taken care of. I want my wife back. I want to have my own family. I'm not going to fall into the trap of a sexless marriage being nothing more than your babysitter living with you. I tore up the papers and threw the pieces on the floor. Give this back to your father and tell him he can kiss my fucking ass. Tell me something, Kirsten, I said. How long have you been in a relationship with Jake? Her eyes widened. I don't understand what you mean, she said. I knew him from college, but that's all. Really? I asked. For some reason, I don't believe in it. I went upstairs, took her clothes out of the closet, and threw them in the guest bedroom. What are you doing? What is it? She asked. Since I no longer have a wife who wants to be faithful to me, I'm kicking you out of my bedroom, I said. I saw very little of Kirsten over the next 2 weeks. She spent most of that time at her parents' house, no doubt making love to Jake. Sam did receive photo and video evidence of the 2 of them engaging in obscenity at a motel on the outskirts of town. I looked it over before giving it to Fred. Just think, Jake said to Kirsten. Soon we'll be able to do this as much as we want. And when your dad joins us in New York, we'll have a great time. Kirsten smiled. Yeah, and I don't even have to worry about getting pregnant with you guys again, she said. Jake laughed. Around the same time, Bart appeared on the video. Kirsten kissed him hard. It's a pity that your husband has to be so stubborn. He really should have agreed to the deal I offered him, he said. However, it's all right. Once we're in New York, they'll all be taken care of forever. Jake and I will arrange everything exactly the way you want, honey. Abe, the children and his parents will suddenly go missing. Abe's house and his parents' house will mysteriously burn down after they are all shot. Their bodies will be cremated and scattered throughout the countryside. No one will find them. We'll declare them dead, and then you'll have Abe's insurance, home insurance, and no kids to worry about. Until then, we'll lay low and not give them the slightest reason to suspect us. What about Mom? Kirsten asked. What about her? She's too scared and stupid to do anything about it. Don't worry about her, dear, Bart said. Kirsten smiled. I can't wait, she said, stroking her father's manhood. Now use me. By this time I was seething with rage. Not only did my so-called loving wife cheat on me with her father and her stepbrother boyfriend, they were all plotting our murder. Fred assured me that the authorities have been informed and measures are being taken to detain them. Finally, Kirsten stayed at the house long enough to make her announcement. I got the job, she said, smiling. Congratulations, I said, trying to look happy. She wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me. Don't worry, darling, she said. I won't let work come between us, I promise. By the way, Dad is throwing a party to officially introduce Jake to the company and announce my promotion. And yes, you are invited, although he is unhappy that you refused to sign his agreement. When is this party going to take place? I asked. Tomorrow night, she told me. So make sure your suit is clean, okay? I called Fred again to inform him of the situation. He assured me that the officers would be on site. We got dressed and went to the party after we took the kids to my parents' house. I put on my suit, as I always did for such occasions, and Kirsten put on a knee-length dress that accentuated her curves without exposing too much. Of course, she could wear battered blue jeans and still look quite appetizing. Now behave yourself as best you can, she told me before we went inside. Once inside, I saw that people were crowding around making small talk. Kirsten went to see her father and Jake. Will you buy the old lady a drink? I turned around and saw Kirsten's mother, Mabel. We went into the bar and I ordered a beer for myself and a cocktail for her. Abe, you're a good man, she said, and I'm really very sorry about everything. Why does your husband hate me so much? I asked. It's simple, she said. You're too blue-collar for his taste. You are coping with your task on your own. You move forward on your own, instead of relying on lackeys to do your dirty work for you. Besides, you're a veteran. When he was younger, he would not have been drafted into the army, and he always wanted Kirsten to marry someone already well off, like Jake. Does he know that Jake already has a wife and child in New York? I asked. At these words, her eyes widened. I do not know, she said. I didn't know about it. And I understand that Jake worked with Bart a few years ago before he left for New York. It's true? I asked. Mabel's face paled slightly. Yes, she and Bart have known each other for a long time. That's how I understand it. Especially considering that Bart is his fluid donor, I said. Mabel's eyes widened. What did you say? What is it? She asked. That's right, I said. I have Jake's birth certificate and a DNA test that shows that Bart is Jake's biological father. Didn't you know? She shook her head. I suspected he was cheating, but I never had any proof, she said. That's not all, I said. None of these children are mine. Are you absolutely sure? What is it? She asked. DNA doesn't lie, I said. Jake is John's father and... So what? Mabel asked. Bart is Kelsey's biological father, I said. Mabel's face turned white and I thought she was going to faint. Oh my God, no, she said. Did you know? I asked. I knew they were close, but not that close. What are you going to do? What is it? She asked. Let's just say this shit hits the bull's eye tonight, I said. I understand, she said. Let me show you something, just so you know, I said, pulling out my smartphone. I showed a video where Bart, Jake, and Kirsten discussed their plot to kill me. Mabel's eyes widened. "Oh my God," she said. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry, Abe. Please forgive me." "It's not your fault," I said. "So what are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm fed up with his nonsense and abusive behavior. After tonight, I'll get rid of his pathetic ass," she said. "Now let's go in there and pretend everything's okay? Kirsten was seated at the main table between her father and Jake, while I was seated at the table facing them. I was unhappy with these arrangements, and even less pleased to learn that her father had deliberately separated us. However, by this time I really didn't care. I looked around and saw a man in a raincoat and several deputies in the hallway in front of the room we used. They managed to get inside before the doors were closed. I looked around at the people at my table and couldn't help but notice that none of them looked me straight in the eye or even spoke to me, except to politely confirm my existence. I looked at Kirsten, but she still didn't meet my eyes. I was beside myself with anger and was looking forward to the end of the evening. Bart stood up and tapped his glass to get everyone's attention. "I'm so glad you all could come tonight," he said, smiling. "I would like to introduce you to the new member of our team, Jake Riley. Some of you already know Jake, as he used to work for us as a contractor 8 years ago. Jake will take over our marketing efforts and work very closely with all our clients to ensure that their needs and those of our shareholders are met." This explained why I had never seen Jake at these events before. Contractors were not usually invited to such corporate events. Everyone applauded this announcement when Jake stood up. I gave what could at best be called a hand clap. Bart continued. "I would also like to introduce his new assistant. She is not only a bright star in a company with a great approach to business, but also my daughter Kirsten Robertson," he added, naming her maiden name. "I'm sorry," he said. "I meant Ryan. Kirsten Ryan." Kirsten stood up and looked around, smiling. She never looked at me once. I wanted to crawl under the table, but her father hadn't finished yet. "I've heard that personal assistants often look like work wives," he said, looking at me. "I know that she will do everything in her power to make Jake's life and work as easy as possible." Jake hugged her as they stood up and continued hugging her as they both looked out into the hall. Kirsten sat down, clearly embarrassed. I didn't know whether to crawl away or jump on the table to beat the shit out of Jake and Kirsten's dad. "Now," Bart said, "let's enjoy our meal." Everyone attacked the food they brought, but I could only take a few bites. I looked at Kirsten, but she was too absorbed in what Jake was telling her. Several times she looked at me with sad eyes, and I hoped that she would get up and refuse to work in the presence of her father. But she didn't do it. The other people at my table were obviously embarrassed for me. After the meal, everyone got up to leave. I went to Kirsten's, but Jake intercepted me. He shook my hand, deliberately squeezing it as hard as he could to establish himself as the alpha male. I squeezed him back harder, maintaining direct eye contact, and noticed a slight grimace on his face when he released me. "So you must be Kirsten's husband," he said, grinning. "Yes, it is," I told him, at least for the moment. It caught him off guard, and Kirsten recoiled. "Don't worry, I'll take very good care of her for you," he said. Leaving, Kirsten looked into my eyes. "What does it all mean?" "What is it?" she asked, displeased. "Let's see. Your father deliberately separated us by conveniently forgetting to use your married name, and that comment about you being Jake's wife at work really pissed me off. I also saw that the two of you seemed to be quite friendly with each other. I don't like being publicly insulted in this way. So, no, I'm not very happy right now," I said. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sure Dad didn't mean anything by it." "I doubt it very much," I told her. "I'm sorry," she said. "Jake, Dad and I are going to a meeting with other executives about the upcoming trip, so I won't be home for a while." "Well, before you go to your extremely important meeting with your husband at work, I want you to meet someone," I said, waving my hand at the man in the raincoat. He came up to us with a large manila folder in his hand. "Kirsten Ryan?" he asked. "Yes," she said. He handed her an envelope. "You've been notified," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Kirsten's face turned white as other people nearby gasped. She opened the envelope and saw the first page headed, "Petition for Divorce." "What is it?" "What is it?" she asked. "Divorce," I told her. "On charges of adultery. I also included DNA tests showing that Jake is John's biological father and your father is Kelsey's fluid donor. I think that makes Kelsey your stepsister. By the way, Bart is Jake's biological father. I referred to the prenuptial agreement that you signed at your father's insistence, and you will also notice that there is an injunction keeping you, your father, or any of your agents, including Jake, at least 500 feet away from me, the children, my family, or home. If you want to arrange a time when you can pick up your things, tell my lawyer." "I don't want a divorce," she said with tears in her eyes. "I don't want a cheating, lying, conniving wife. By the way, I suggest you sign these papers immediately. You won't like what happens if you decide to fight it. I have all kinds of videos of you and Jake there. I doubt you want this to get to everyone you know," I said. "Don't worry about the kids, I'll take good care of them for you." "What do you mean?" "What is it?" she asked. "There are a few other people I want to introduce to you, your father and Jake," I said, pointing to the deputies. "Bart and Jake came up to us before the deputies got to us." "What the hell do you think you're doing, man?" Bart growled. "Fuck you, asshole. I'm divorcing Kirsten and turning you all over to the authorities," I said. Bart reached out to grab my shirt, but the deputy stopped him. "Bart Robertson, you are under arrest for incest and conspiracy to commit murder," he said, drawing loud gasps from the rest of the room. 2 more deputies grabbed Jake and handcuffed him. Kirsten looked at me with shock in her eyes. "Abe, you can't mean this seriously," she said. "I love you." "Bullshit," I said. 2 more deputies grabbed her and handcuffed her, reading her rights. Bart went berserk and his eyes popped out of his head. "I'm going to kill you, you fucking fool," he shouted as the officers dragged him away. A reporter with a camera was just a few feet away from us and captured the whole incident. Mabel walked up to Bart and kicked him in the balls. "I'm too stupid, aren't I?" "Stop it," she screamed. "Fuck you, asshole. I'll show you, you fool. Consider yourself divorced. You and your slippery daughter are a fucking piece of dog shit." The deputy calmly pushed Mabel out of the way while the other 2 dragged Bart away. The news that night was definitely worth watching. "Today there was a major shakeup in the local business community," said the newsreader. Businessman Bart Robertson, along with his daughter and a man who identified himself as his son, were arrested this evening on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and incest at an event dedicated to the announcement of the hiring of a new leader. The report was shortened to a video recording of the arrest. A red-faced Bart was seen threatening to kill me when deputies tried to pull him away. The video then showed Mabel kicking him in the groin. The victim of the alleged conspiracy, the husband of Robertson's daughter, told television that he has filed for divorce and is seeking custody of 2 children, although DNA analysis shows that he is not the biological father. Stay tuned for updates. I turned off the TV and sat down in my deep armchair, exhausted by the events of the evening. The epilogue. The 3 accomplices were detained without bail because the judge believed they could escape. The investigation lasted almost a month, and he was assisted by the telephone system that we installed for Robertson's company a few months ago. The system was completely digital and recorded all calls, both incoming and outgoing. It was set up with a warning that all calls would be recorded for educational purposes. Obviously, Bart was so arrogant that he didn't think his calls would kill him. But they did. The investigators were able to determine who Bart paid for the attack on us. Several gangsters who were paid refused the testimony of the state and came clean, telling the authorities everything. A lawyer and a Supreme Court judge were also implicated in the conspiracy. Although it wasn't necessary, both Mabel and I testified against our spouses. The video provided by Sam helped a lot, as did the DNA results that I gave to the district attorney. We also learned that Kirsten's relationship with her father began when she was in high school, and it was he who introduced her to Jake. By the time it was all over, all 3 had been convicted on all counts and were facing decades in prison. Mabel, as it turned out, was far from stupid. What I didn't know was that she had 2 master's degrees, one in the field of business, the other in the field of economics. She also followed Bart's business dealings quite closely and knew how things worked. She raped Bart during the divorce, received almost all of his property, including a house with a business, and took possession of it. Within 6 months, the company was put in order and bathed in profits, and she turned out to be a wonderful grandmother for children. I saw Kirsten for the last time before she was taken away to serve a 25-year sentence. "I signed the divorce papers," she said, pushing the folder toward me. I made sure everything was signed and looked at her. "Why?" I asked her. "I thought we were in love with each other. I thought we were going to spend the rest of our lives together." "I do not know," she said. "Dad has always been my first love. I thought I could put this behind me, but it seems like I can't." "But why kill us? Why kill your own children?" I asked. She shrugged her shoulders. I was hoping that you would sign the agreement drawn up by Dad. When you didn't, I really didn't see any other choice, she said. It was stupid, I know. I am so sorry. Yes, it is, I said sarcastically. I know you don't believe me, but I really loved you. Is there anything I can ever do to make up for all the hurt I've caused you? She asked with tears in her eyes. I looked at her one last time. Just one thing, I said before I left. Burn in hell, you fool. End.